the skeletal system. The purpose of the skeletal system is to provide support for your body, protection to underlying organs, framework, something for your muscles to hold on to so that way when they contract they can move parts of your body, movement. It houses tissues and inorganic salts, and it's also a place of blood cell formation. Let's talk about the different shapes of bones. We have short bones. Short bones tend to be small cube-like bones. You'll find those here in the wrist. You can also find them in the ankle. Flat bones are flat. This is the scapula or the shoulder blade. Your ribs, your skull are other examples of flat bones. Long bones are those that are longer than they are wide. The main bones in your arms and legs are long bones. Also, those bones in your fingers, your phalanges. These are all long bones here. Just because they're short in stature doesn't mean that they're not long bones. They are long bones, but they're just short long bones. Irregular bones would be vertebrae, and a sesamoid bone would be something like your patella. Your patella is your kneecap. It is called a sesamoid bone because it looks like a gigantic sesame seed. If you look at it kind of face on, it has a sesame seed shape to it. Looking at a long bone, there are several parts of the long bone that we need to look at. The epiphysis is the ends of the bone. The epiphysis is the ends of the bone. The shaft of the bone is the diaphysis. And then the growth plate, or where the epiphysis and the diaphysis meet, essentially, is the metaphysis. If we cut a long bone in half, we can look at the inside of the bone. We have a cavity on the inside of the bone called the medullary cavity, which is what I'm coloring in here. The lining to the medullary cavity is called the endosteum. The lining to the outside of the bone is the periosteum. Periosteum lines the outside of the bone. At the ends of the bone is articular cartilage. Here, that white is articular cartilage. You also find articular cartilage up here. The articular cartilage is made out of hyaline. We have two main types of bone. We have spongy bone. Spongy bone tends to be in the ends of the bone, and it's called spongy because it looks spongy in nature. It does give a little bit of shock absorption to that end of the bone. And then you have compact bone. Compact bone looks more solid. This would be compact bone here. On a cellular level, osteocyte is the word for bone cell. If you remember back from tissues, this is the bone tissue. Looking at the parts and pieces, the darkened circles here in the center are the Haversian canals. The rings themselves are the lamella. The little blackened spots are the lacunae. This is where the bone cell is located. So the osteocyte is in the lacunae. The whole ring itself is the osteon. The skeleton plays an important role in homeostasis of the body. And you remember homeostasis is that keeping the body in a balance. Blood calcium is important to the function of muscles, especially. Calcium is stored within the bones. When you have high blood calcium, calcitonin will be released into the blood. Bone is going to pick up that calcium, take it out of the blood, and put it into the bone, and it's going to start to build bone. Osteoblasts are the types of cells that do this bone building. When blood calcium gets low, the parathyroid hormone is released, and calcium is released from the bone, removing calcium from the bone. Osteoclasts are the cells that do that. So as your blood calcium gets lower, it's being removed from the bone. And if you don't replace that blood calcium, it'll continue removing it from the bone, making the bones more brittle and break much more easily. There are two main types of bone formation. We have endochondral ossification. This is the way that most of your long bones are going to be forming when you're in the fetal stage. Bone is kind of outlined in hyaline cartilage. Then the primary ossification center in the center of the bone starts to solidify and create bone out of that cartilage. It moves towards the end of the bone until it is completely solid. Intramembranous ossification is the formation of flat bones. Flat bones are formed in between layers of tissue. Let's take a look at some bony processes. We're going to look at generalized processes now. As we are going through the different bones, you will need to know the specific names of some of these bony processes. A condyle would be here down at the bottom of this bone. This is the femur, your thigh bone. This is what would articulate as part of your knee. An epicondyle is a smaller process just above a condyle. This would be the epicondyle here. A trochanter is something that's only found in the femur. It is this big bump here. The head is this large knob. And then the groove is that area there. Grooves are generally there for passage of nerves and blood vessels. A cotyloid would be this depression here that's part of the hip. A tuberosity is going to be a large process that sticks out. A foramen is going to be a hole. This foramen here in the hip, this hole here, or this hole here, is the largest foramen in the body. And then we have crest. A crest is a large prominence. This is the crest of the hip. This is the point that sticks out in the front, that is your hip, what you would consider your hip bone. A fossa is a depression. This is a fossa here. This is also a fossa here. This is a spine. It's kind of a slender process that sticks up. This is also a spine here. On this bone, we also have another foramen. This is a foramen here. And then we have facet. A facet would be a kind of small flat depression. So this would be a facet, and this would be a facet. That and that are also facets. This here is a notch. A tubercle, again, is something that protrudes out. So this kind of bump here is a tubercle. A fovea is a small divot. This is the top of the femur. This is a fovea here. One way that I like to remember these is that if it begins with the letter T, it's generally going to be a sticky outie, where it's sticking out of the bone. It's going to be something that is a bump or a protrusion. If it begins with the letter F, it's going to be a divot or a hole within the bone. So T, stick out, F, hole within the bone. We can divide our skeleton into three main portions. The axial skeleton, kind of like the axial portion of our body, consists of the skull, the hyoid apparatus. The hyoid apparatus is this here. It is a small bone found just below our lower jaw. It helps with tongue movement. The vertebral column, the sternum, and the ribs. The appendicular skeleton is going to be your forearms, your hind limbs, and the pelvic girdle. Visceral skeleton would be bone found in soft tissue. Two examples that we will look at is the os penis and the os cordis. The os penis is found mostly in dogs. It is a bone found within the penis. When the male dog is engaged with the female, the os penis kind of hooks into the pelvis of the female, making it much more difficult for them to separate, allowing them to get their job done. The os cordis is a small bone found in mostly bovine or cows that keeps the aorta, the large artery coming from the heart, open.